as for today's event, it's sponsored by Jiminny. They surveyed hundreds of B2B sales pros across the US, UK, and Nordics to see how sales teams have been affected in this post-pandemic and possible pre-recession world. We've got Tom, Nasri, and Brad with us today to break down each issue and share how you should tackle these challenges and reach success. All right, so let's go ahead and get the chat going. Go down to your chat, bottom right. There should be a little blue box. Toggle that to everybody, not just hosts and panelists, so that we can keep the convo going with everybody. While these incredible speakers intros themselves, let us get to know you. Drop your role in the chat, where you're tuning in from, your LinkedIn, all that good stuff. If you have questions throughout today's event, we're going to get those toward the end. Be sure to drop those in the Q&A so they don't get lost in the chat. That's one of the best parts about being here live. We can kind of cater the conversation toward the end for those that are actually here. So we want to provide a safe space for you to raise a hand if you are hiring or looking for a job. If you are happy to do that, drop that in the chat as well. Just type in yes if you are looking for a job. Drop your LinkedIn. If you're hiring, drop that job posting, whatever you feel comfortable doing. All right, Tom, I think it's time. I'm going to go ahead and pass things over to you. Give us a quick intro of yourself, and then pass it over to Brad and Nasri.
Thanks, Savannah. Hey guys, how you all doing? We're obviously super excited to sponsor the Sales Hacker event today. We've got some really interesting insights to share. So my name's Tom. I'm the CEO and founder of Jiminny, a conversation intelligence platform. We've been around for about 6 years, but previous to that, I've been in B2B sales and I was an SVP of sales for too long, probably 10 years. But it's good to see you all today. I'm excited to talk everything through. Brad?
Yeah, hi everyone. Brad Rosen. John, I see you're from Michigan. I'm also from Michigan, grew up there. So great state of Michigan, pure Michigan. But my background, I've been in B2B SaaS for a long time, helped grow a company called G2, kind of from the ground up, and was in finance prior to that. I'm currently the president and head of revenue operations for sales assembly.
Naz?
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Brad. Naz, I'm a VP of revenue at a company called Hakodo. I'm currently based in London, in England. I've also been in B2B SaaS sales for about 12 to 13 years at the moment, and been a leader of sales teams, customer success, and partnerships for the last 3.5, 4 years. So yeah, really excited to share some insights with you. Hopefully it makes sense what I speak about.
Cheers, guys. Awesome. Yeah, as Savannah said, if you want to drop questions in the chat for the guys, be more than happy to answer them at the end or as we go through. Awesome, guys. So just going to give you a bit of context to today before we jump in. So the title of the webinar, obviously you guys signed up, Sales as We've Never Known It, and how to solve the top 5 issues that sales team are having today. So there's some really interesting topical stuff that we're kind of going to go through. So what we did was we commissioned a study where we spoke to over 300 B2B sales professionals. So as Savannah said, this was across the US, the UK and the Nordics. And it was really a pulse check sort of post-COVID, but also, you know, the way the market is right now to see how people are feeling, what's going on, and get an understanding. And we produced a report on it recently. If you signed up for the webinar, you'll get sent this report anyway, but you can download it on our website. What will you learn today? So there's kind of 4 key things we're going to cover. How B2B sales has changed post-pandemic. That's something that's really insightful. The top challenges B2B sales is facing, and really we're going to discuss how to overcome them. The effects of economic concerns on B2B sales with the way the market is right now, and where and how businesses are investing in sales development from the feedback that we got. Cool. Awesome. So the first point that came up, which was really interesting when I read the report, was that B2B sales, we asked the question, is it harder, is it the same, or is it easier post the pandemic? And it was really interesting to see that 48% of people actually said it was harder to sell post-pandemic. The guys have got lots of interesting thoughts on why, but I'll open it up. Brad, do you want to kick off? Why do you think that nearly half the people said that sales is harder over the last 2 years?
Isn't everything harder post-pandemic? It's almost like is anything harder post-pandemic? But sales particularly, and I think that that's just because of when you look at the way that you sell. A lot of times, whether we were in person all the time or part of the time when we were selling, at least we were able to have conversations, whether that's internally or externally, and get to know people more. So if we're selling, to a group of buyers, the best way to get a hold of them, and probably the only way if you're remote, is this way, through Zoom. And so now I got to find time on my calendar. Oh, I'm not available this week. Let me try next week. And that's just trying to navigate internally. Imagine trying to navigate externally, external calendars as well. So trying to get everybody on the same page and then actually get somebody to then portray exactly what you're trying to sell them is tough. And before, they could see somebody in the coffee room or on a lunch break and be able to have that conversation. So I think it's really elongated sales cycles. And I think it's really made it much more challenging to show value in those tools while not having a lot of folks in the same room. So that would be my take on it, is the idea of really going fully virtual makes it harder both from an internal and external perspective.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally tend to agree. I think depends how old, how long people have been selling, but it used to be called inside sales. Now everyone sells inside sales. It's called remote selling, right? But it's definitely a different challenge building relationships on video than it is in person. So I think that has a massive part to play, and that you're maybe missing that link in the same way. Naz, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, very much agree with kind of what Brad said there. And just to build on that, before we probably saw on average 3 or 4 key decision makers in any kind of deal or process we were working through. And now there's probably about 6 to 8. And then if you're trying to get 6 to 8 people together at the same time, playing that diary tennis with each other, trying to find the time on Zoom, it just makes things a lot more difficult. But I think also, and we'll touch on this a bit later, but I think companies are now really focusing on efficiency rather than how many tools can I have in my tech stack. So every deal is getting scrutinized even more in terms of, okay, what's the ROI on this? What's the value case on this? How do we need this? And if you're building that remotely across multiple stakeholders in the deal, it's getting even more difficult. And I think on the flip side, doing that internal stakeholder alignment, so bringing your internal product teams together, your champions together, your exec sponsors internally together to kind of help you close the deal, you're also playing that back-to-back diary game and trying to find that Zoom time. It's not easy. And I think that's why you've seen these results in this survey for a simple question.
I wish I was much better at being on time for meetings. It's something I definitely need to work on. I start the day very well, and it kind of gradually gets worse. I think a lot of people in the same boat.
Hey, likewise. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. Guys, if you individually, as whether you're an individual contributor or you run a team, let us know in the chat if you've got any views on why you think sales has maybe become more challenging or difficult. We'd love to get your kind of views as we go through. So this one is really topical. So as part of the survey, it said, are you going back to the office or not? So, this is really interesting. So basically 7 in 10 on the survey said they are now working remotely. And 92% said their employer is attempting them to bring the sales team back into the office in some way, shape or form. So what we're going to do today, we're going to ask the guys what they think and what their situation is with their teams. But we're going to do a quick poll, and we're going to actually ask you guys what your current situation is, because we're intrigued to see. So are you getting your team back into the office? I love these polls on Zoom. You can see it moving in real time. So what is it? 54% hybrid, 33% no. Takes a few seconds to click in. Yeah. So we're kind of seeing not too dissimilar in terms of either not going back into the office or hybrid. So kick off, what Brad, Naz, we'll go to you first this time. What do you guys do in terms of your team? What's the situation?
Yeah, we've stayed completely hybrid. And given everyone the flexibility around when they want to come into the office and how they want to work. and even extending into kind of flexible hours as well. So it was a conscious decision by myself as kind of the leader on the commercial side, but also all functional leads within the business took the same decision. I think it's important because we allow the employees and predominantly the sales team to have that individual focus time where they need to do their prospecting, they need to do their follow-ups, they need to work on their deals. But then when we're in that office time together, it's even more special. And that's where we really focus on grabbing that sharing of knowledge and creating that buzz with one another. And some of the reasons we've kind of kept people and given them that decision is really from a talent retention point of view. Because I think if I look at my team and kind of the diversity across it from culture, background, age, sex, etc., everyone has different needs and how they want to run their life, but also their working life. So myself, with children, having the flexibility at home is really valuable for me. But then my younger team members who are probably single, living alone, they value that time together as a team. So it's giving everyone that flexibility so that the talent can thrive and that we retain that talent as well. I think,
So Naz, you're hybrid, and then it's different teams going into set days into the office, right? Dependent, team dependent.
Yeah, the SDRs, for example, they agree amongst themselves to be in 3 days a week, and that's their time that they do their call blitzing together. That's where they do their training and their peer coaching together, and that was really come out from their own decision. No one imposed that upon them. And I think that was a really, really promising thing to see from the team.
Yeah, it's great. It's happened organically, it sounds like. But then, so that's really interesting. You got this hybrid approach. So how are you getting the best out of the team? Like I know you mentioned about having that quality time together, but how do you feel you're making the best of that hybrid situation?
I think it comes down to the culture that you build within the team. And it's a culture of accountability across individual and across leadership. So one of the things that everyone will be saying that we miss when we're not together is that buzz, that knowledge share, that, oh, I just got this really difficult objection. Can you help me? Or what did you do when we got this question from a customer? And having that culture where people can proactively share that over Slack or over Zoom meetings and driving a weekly behavior of we're all going to get together for an hour, whether we're remote or Zoom, and we're going to watch back some calls. We're going to listen back to some meetings, and we're going to actually peer coach each other and take away the learnings. And it's driving that and making sure you keep that habit up. So regardless if you're remote or you're in the office together, you're still getting that knowledge share and that coaching, which I think for any team in a growing and scaling SaaS business is super important.
Yeah, we've always been hybrid, and I think you just constantly have to work extra hard at those communications all the time. Brad, what about Sales Assembly? What are you guys doing?
We started as hybrid as well, and we have a co-working space where we can go into the office and meet with each other periodically. And I think that's super important because I think you do need to build that culture, and you do need to have, for instance, whiteboarding sessions or brainstorming sessions. Those things just really aren't productive on Zoom, talking over each other, not being able to see the same things, even just to the point of like closing your computers and having a discussion without having like your email in the background and distractions. And that's something that we don't talk about enough. Is Zoom is so coin operated. Like you get on at a certain time, you hop off at a certain time, and then you got another one back to back, and it becomes very challenging to actually get into a zone and have a really strong conversation where you're connecting with someone. So that's whether that's in sales or with your team. I think both the same challenges. And this actually ties back to the last slide. One of the challenges, Naz even mentioned turning to somebody and saying, this person gave me this objection, like, how would you handle it? That osmosis and that learning is super important and on the spot, because it's really challenging to come back to this later. You're not in the moment. You kind of forget what the tone was. You can re-listen to the call, obviously, and that's super important. But there's this idea of like in the moment you're hearing it, or overhearing another person's call. You weren't on the call. It was just they're next to you. So you heard their call and you heard a really great way that they handled an objection or that they pitched a new product. And that's really hard to pick up. And so those are really important points to have within, your organization. And so we're really big on making sure that we can facilitate that in certain ways, but also provide the space to go do what you need to do with your work-life balance and your family, and work when you need to from home, and lock in when you need to, right? Really focus, because there is that too. when other people are on the floor talking, coming over to your desk, asking questions, that can ruin some of your zone of genius and your focus as well. So the best of both worlds, in my opinion, is the hybrid. And I'm glad that I'm really sad that the pandemic happened, but like, I think it is very healthy that we potentially have a nice change here. And whether that's like 4-1, 3-2, whatever that is, hopefully there's some level of that moving forward where we can find the best of both worlds.
So you're hybrid too, and then, you know, how are you making sure in your sales team that you're getting the performance you need, and how are you making the best of that situation? What are the things that you do?
You know, coming from you know, an analytical ops background as well, like, I'm always about the data. It's very simple. The data speaks for itself, especially in sales. It's very simple. Are you performing or are you not, right? If we were in development, or if we were in, you know, some other product or something, it's a little more challenging to stack rank people and quantify exactly how well they're doing. Oh yeah, I think they're doing a good job. It's very anecdotal. In sales, it's not anecdotal. I can tell you exactly how well you're doing, and relative to your, you know, your peers, and relative to last quarter and last year and pre-pandemic, I can run all that data back. So I steep myself in the data, and I think the good news is I think a lot of companies have become more data centric because it was forced by the pandemic, because that was the only way to manage your folks and to really understand how we were doing, and to go kind of back to basics of just like, what are we doing well? How do we lean in and double click on that? So I you know, steep it in the data. That doesn't mean that the data tells all, but that should be your guiding light. And you should make sure that you have systems and processes set up to be able to track that data, and that everybody is fully transparent on what is the data that we're using to track, you know, efficiency and effectiveness, and what's going to happen if we fall behind, and how are we going to, you know, catch back up. So that's how we've always looked at it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, I think we were talking about it offline earlier before we came on. I'm constantly recruiting and interviewing. I think if I said to someone you can't be hybrid, I don't think I'll be able to recruit them. Yeah. Not right now, not in a major city. I think it definitely is SaaS and tech anyway. It feels that that is the way forward. So super interesting from that data there. So the next question we asked was, obviously onboarding has completely changed. People are thinking about it very differently. But everyone was completely remote during COVID, and then now everyone's transitioning to this kind of hybrid model. That's what it feels like, right? We had no choice but to be fully remote. Now we're transitioning to hybrid model. So it was interesting, guys, that 6 out of 10 salespeople said that onboarding has actually improved in their organization. There were some of the top things here that we picked out, like training on company products generally had improved. That was a top pick. Sales technology and tools had got better. Online sales and training courses, you know. So, Brad, we'll start with you this time. So, what are you doing? What did you do to improve onboarding to start with?
Yeah, to improve onboarding, I think this one actually is significantly different. You'd bring a cohort of folks in at the same time, and they would sit through a week or two of training. You'd bring in the founder and CEO would talk, and then someone from product would talk, and some sales leaders would talk, and you'd have this really nice bonding experience. You'd go out for drinks or dinner potentially after, and you'd have some group exercises. Maybe you have some mentors. You can still do all that on Zoom. It just becomes a lot less effective of feeling like a group. And so I think that now it's really trying to continue that and make sure that people feel welcome. And Naz has brought this up a few times, but like, the culture is really important in making people feel welcome. You know, we have a company, you know, text message, and we have, you know, the emails and different things that go out to try and welcome folks. We send them some swag, and these are little things, but it is a big deal. If you can't feel welcome in person, at least you feel welcome, you know, virtually, and you feel like they're taking care of you and they're excited for you to be there. That's hard to show over the phone or over Zoom. So trying to be able to bring that together. And then, you know, a lot of what we've seen as far as onboarding is continuing to build out those processes and making sure that the training is continuing well beyond the first week or two of training. You know, sales assembly inherently, we do that as an always on opportunity for folks to learn within their organization. But we do believe that that's part of the issue, is like, you train folks when they get started, you'll train if a new product comes out, and then ultimately, like, kind of in between where you can, but that doesn't really help develop folks in an ongoing basis to get better. And that's why people are trying to develop their careers with us, and they want to believe that we're investing in them as a professional. And so for us, making sure that everybody's learning everything they need to know now, but on an ongoing basis, and we provide that opportunity. So whether that's budget for them to go out and find other resources to train with themselves, and or providing opportunities, for them to learn is really important.
So it's that consistency after onboarding and putting some dollars behind it as well to make sure that people can.
It's not a set it and forget it thing. Like you're constantly evolving, and we say, "Oh, ramp time's 3 months." Is it? Could be a month for some. It could be 6 months for some. Like we don't know, depending on what your skill set is. What time you come into the company, right? Do we have an exact product market fit, or are we still evolving? And so the training needs to keep going and moving along. And everyone has different experiences. Some people are better at prospecting. Some people are better at closing. How do we create that osmosis within the team so that everybody can learn from each other as well?
There's always 2 ramp points for me. There's the ramp point in which you're able to do the job, fundamentally. And there's when you're fully ramped, which you can deal with every edge case, every situation, everything that comes up, and they're 2 different inflection points. So always try and measure both. Brad, what do you still, before we move on to Naz, what do you still think needs to improve? So you've done all those things around budget, consistency. Like, what do you still need to do to improve onboarding it in your organization?
I think for us, the biggest thing is making sure that when there are those points where you have a question or you're stuck, we always encourage, interactions. But the problem becomes when you can't turn around and say to somebody physically, like, "Hey, I'm stuck here." It does become that, their calendar's kind of full and maybe I could reach out later. I hope I'm not bothering them. Like, how do you provide that outlet, whether that's a Slack channel or a mentor or somebody that they can turn to in the moment? Because 6 hours later doesn't really help. They're probably going to spin their wheels. They might get caught up or mentally frustrated through whatever they're trying to work through. And so I think that that's the biggest challenge still, is providing that ability to ask questions on the fly, get them answered, and then continue to ramp.
Yeah, we set up something during COVID called Confusion Clinic, which is basically like a safe space where it was just like a Friday afternoon after lunch where anyone can come and just go, "I'm confused about this. I don't understand it. Something happened this week and I just didn't get it." And then it turned into a Slack channel, and now there's a daily. Someone's confused about something daily.
A lot of confusion going on. What do we do?
But it doesn't get channeled to one person. Multiple people can chip in. So it could be something about an integration where an engineer could help, or something could help across teams. So it's kind of cross purpose. But like having that space where people can go, "Hey, I don't understand this," or confused. I think that's also important as well. Cool, that's super helpful, Brian. Naz, what did you do to improve onboarding at Hokodo?
Yeah, I've onboarded kind of several AEs in kind of during lockdown and SDRs during lockdown, and then kind of in this hybrid world as well, cross-border, all sorts of things. And I just remember back to the kind of my first few sales jobs when I was onboarded, and all it was a quick product demo, an account list, a phone, and like, "Well, cool, see you in 3 months. Good luck. Let us know how you get on." And that just really isn't good enough. And I think you're laughing because I think you've probably been in a similar position, Brad and Tom. So I really wanted to make sure that the reps that I hired were set up for success, not only across how to sell and the way we sell, so all the methodologies, process, etc., but really understanding the company that they're selling for, right? So the onboarding kind of curriculum was split out into starting really with the purpose, the mission and vision of Hokodo and the business. Why are we here? Why do we exist? What problems are we solving? All the way through into how the product is built from the ground up. So they become tech experts and product experts, all the way into what each function is doing within the business. So, the argument is, okay, well, every function serves the sales as an internal customer. Well, let's take time to understand, how do these teams and functions operate? What's success mean for them? How can we be better salespeople internally and externally, right? So they get a solid understanding of the whole business as a machine and their part within that machine to drive the revenue and growth and expansion. So that was kind of the curriculum that was built out. And then what's really important with any training and any onboarding you do is making sure that that knowledge is retained. So at each curriculum endpoint, I would have an accreditation of some form, and that could be a quiz, that could be a role play, that could be an actual presentation. And you want to test, is this person ready, right, to take it on to the next level? So if it's a product tour, are they able now? Am I confident? Are they confident to go and do this for real in front of a customer? And that's really where you start to test the retention. And putting gates in and pass gates and making sure they progress through that onboarding was some of the improvements I made when I first joined.
So just playing that back out, you've got like the making sure the company training happens. I really believe in that, like the why of the company, what you're all here for, why does it exist, and you breaking it out. I always think you need to learn the company first, whether it's a week or two, to then understand your own department or your team. And then you talk about this accreditation thing. Yeah, I've done something like that before in a previous company. We called it fit to pitch, where you're actually understanding, are you ready? Yeah. Did you retain that knowledge? Was that information helpful? So I'm sure it'd be great to share, like, you know, everyone's really busy and time's really difficult. How did you find the time to do these accreditations? Is it just Google Forms? Is it simple stuff? Like, what have you done to this, like, make it work?
Yeah, I kept it really simple. So I did create a Google form for some of the quizzes, and now, you know, a quiz on Medic, for example, and just making sure that they've understood Medic and how it applies. A quiz around the CRM and the different stages we're using within HubSpot and all the fields. So little basic things like that. Then for the actual accreditations where they were role plays or kind of product demos, etc. A product demo they could do in their own time and record via Loom or Zoom and then send it to their buddy or me as an examiner to mark it in our own time. So that was nice and easy, wasn't a strain on people's diaries. And then for the actual role plays which were live, we'd get sponsorship from various people within the business. So our CEO would come and pretend to be a customer for 1AE. Our VP of Finance would come and pretend to be a customer for 1AE. And that would all get recorded in Jiminny, shameless plug. And then I could watch that back in my own time to score them, pass that feedback on, etc. But anyone who was an accreditor was given a scorecard that they could easily measure success against and give that person kind of a pass-fail immediately. And then I or my other kind of sales leaders would come in and do the actual full feedback loop for the individual to move them on. So yes, it's a big investment on time, but you see the improvement on productivity, you see the improvement on speed to ramp, and it's a valid investment to be making in your people.
Cool. Yeah, I get that. Sometimes it's just keeping it simple and not overthinking it. Like, sounds like you've done a lot there. If you look at it now, and I know you've grown quite a bit over the last couple of years, like what do you, like, same question as went to Brad, is what do you still think needs to improve? If you're kind of reflecting on what you've done, where do you think it still needs to improve onboarding for you?
Well, I agree on the kind of continuous learning piece that Brad talked about, and investing in training outside, so giving everyone that development budget. Absolutely, that's something we do too. What I think as well I would improve now, and I'm actively trying to do, is retesting that knowledge retention for someone who's been there for a year or a year and a half. Because once you get set in your ways, you get comfortable, bad habits can kind of spill in. You want to make sure we're trying to avoid those bad habits coming in as early as possible. But also, as a company scales, and for everyone's kind of benefit, we've gone from seed A and B. So our product kind of is, although it's 2 years old, completely different product and use case to what we were selling 2 years ago. So I think if I looked at the onboarding now, I'd probably have a little panic and go, oh, that's so out of date. I can't believe I'm teaching people this. So it's making sure that you can keep that document live, breathing, and continuously updated with the latest things that you're finding out in the field. So I think there's always room for kind of keeping them improved.
Yeah, that's great, guys. This is interesting for me when I look at the data here that only just over 25% said like team offsites and annual kickoffs, because they're such an easy thing to do. You know, sometimes they take a bit of planning and investment, whether they're company wide or team wide. You know, whether you're kicking it off for the year, the quarter, you know, you can do a mini half day. Like, they're such a good thing, and it always comes back for me, communication and relationships. If you work on them within your team, most other things can run smoothly, because it is a team effort to sell and do everything together. But I mean, it's interesting to see that people aren't. That's such an opportunity to do more of that, for sure. Cool. So this is kind of interesting one. I know, Brad, we were talking about it. Is like, do you want to talk about something that hasn't happened yet? But this is the question in the
That's it.
Economic recession and fears is, basically 65% of people said generally that they were concerned that their country's economy might dip this year, maybe go into recession, and it might affect their work, how they can hit their OTE. How are you guys thinking about this in your business and helping your team through it? Brad?
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to it. I'm a fan of not trying to, read into the future. I'm not saying that we should be totally oblivious to what's going on. And there are certain macroeconomic factors that are playing a part in everyone's business. But that doesn't mean that the world is falling apart. If you were to ask us in March of 2020, if 6 months from then, the B2B tech industry would have a massive boom and everybody that was in it would be seeing, great sales and all the salespeople were doing well and that nobody could even hire anybody because it was going so well. Like, you would not have predicted that. So recessions come in many different forms. They go in different lengths and different ways. Like, we could already be past the recession. I have no idea, right? Like, we just don't know. In Europe, where you guys are, could be very different than Chicago, where I am. So you can't play into this game of like what ifs. You have to keep doing what you're doing and make sure you're evolving with the business and with the economy. And so what does that mean? That means continuing to do the right things. It may not, sales cycles may lengthen and deals, you may have to discount more, but you have to be creative. And that's what sales is finding the solutions for people's problems. Because if you think about your own business, there are a lot of tools that you're not going to cut out. You might cut a few out because you're looking at spending, but you're still using a lot of tools. And if there's something that's going to help drive value for your business, you're probably still going to invest, right? So if you in the last 6 months, when we're technically in a recession, have you gone to your sales manager? Have the sales manager's gone to their CFO and asked for budget for XYZ? Could be training and development. It could be a new tool that helps prospect or helps identify, the ICP of certain organizations. And so if you're going and asking for budget, so is everybody else. So the key is then matching up that your product and really being able to show that your product is going to drive demonstrable business for everybody else. Because guess what? When you're in a recession, everybody else needs to sell as well, right? Like, they're feeling the same issues. And so if your tool can help them do that, then you're in a great spot. So I'm not a fan of the fear of recession. I'm a fan of thinking about, okay, if things do slow down, what are the offers? What are the things that I can use to combat the issue of, pulling back, maybe tightening budgets, maybe thinking through longer sales cycles? And how am I going to be able to manage my pipeline, make sure I'm hitting my goals, even though it might be a tougher environment to sell into?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. I think there might be a lot of people out there working today who have never gone through a sort of downturn as well. So
That's
like,
right.
when was the last big one? 2008. But like, it's
Let's hope it's not that bad, right? Like, that was really bad. And don't get me wrong, like, you did what you had to do in those times. But a lot of times you see, whether you want to call it a hockey stick or, a pretty big jump afterwards once you bottom out. And so prepare yourself for that. Build the pipeline, build the relationships, make sure you're talking to the right people so that when budgets do open up, you're the person they're calling, right? So there's also things where it might be rocky for a little bit. Maybe it's a quarter, maybe it's a year, I don't know. But there's still things you can do to ensure that your long-term success is ultimately the thing that you're leaning on. And so, what are you going to do? Just stop prospecting, whatever? No, you need to do more of it, and you need to do more of providing value so that if those things do turn around, then you're in the best position possible to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Kind of listening to the things you're saying there, is like, you've got to be better at showing probably ROI, how much you can help and support. Sales is always challenged. It's always a grind. You always got to work hard, but I think showing those things and just listening to you there, things that are going through my mind is like trying different things. Like, are you looking at a different ICP? Are you looking at a different market? Are you lucky enough that your product can be sold internationally? Like as a team, you've got to try things, right? When markets change. It's interesting. Cool. What about you, Naz? How have you thought about this?
Yeah, Brad, you just brought back some memories for me. So I started my first job during the 2008-9 financial crisis, straight out of uni, and I was selling at the time a financial services product. You think, well, geez, I'm not going to have a good time here, am I? However, that product boomed because it solved a problem during a crisis, right? It had an ROI, a tangible value case for those users and businesses that needed that solution. I think that's what we need to be doing now.
I was in it too. I was in structured finance at Bank of America in 2008, and that was just the reality. And you would have said, "Wow, that's a terrible place to be." Actually, they really needed us because they needed to make sure that everything was running smoothly. When I say smoothly, like all the deals were modeled correctly, and we knew exactly what was going on because there was a lot of litigation. So you just never know if you're trying to predict exactly what the ramifications are going to be, good or bad.
Exactly. And I think if you look at the market today, I'm really not an economist by any means, but everything is already kind of baked in. People are expecting it to happen, so they're reacting now, right? So we're going to see that within the sales cycles. So in terms of what we're doing, there's two things. We're preparing as a company, and we're preparing as individuals and as a team, right? Because my reps are probably in their mind thinking, well, hitting my target is going to be really hard. I'm not going to earn my OTE this year. It's going to be really tough. So it's about how do you manage that expectation and enable them to see that it is achievable, or actually adjusting the comp plan so they feel that it's achievable and they can see how they can get to it, right? It's not going to be the same world as what we were used to a year ago or during that little boom between the pandemic and now. And then preparing as a company, really go and drill down to your ICP. So I've adjusted our kind of sales process. I've adjusted our go-to-market so that we look at our ICP and take the top tier of our ICP, where we really know we have an impact, where the business case is solid, where it's going to be signed off by the founders, the CFOs, the MDs that we're selling to, because it makes sense as a solution for them. And then in terms of adjusting the comp plan behind that, my SDRs and my AEs will get more comp if they sell to one of those top tier ICP criteria, right? So that's where they know what to go after. They're incentivized to go after the right thing. And I think we all know comp drives behavior, so pay them on what you want them to do. And business wins because those deals are the ones that are going to generate the most value for our customers. So one eye on our kind of NRR rates and retention rates for the years ahead, but also value for us and value for kind of mutual value across the deals. They'll be the quicker ones to close out of everything because we know the need is there. And that's how you can get 1 foot ahead of pre-recession fear. And I'm going to keep saying pre-recession fear because it might not even happen, but it's going to be this environment of uncertainty that we're probably going to sit through for another 2 quarters while that lag data comes out to tell us, oh yeah, we are in a recession. So that's the thing. ICP, make sure you've got the right business case that's solid and incentivize your reps to do the right thing.
Being more focused at the time, definitely. 1-to-1, maybe not 1-to-many. Awesome. Cool, guys. Before we enter the last point, if anyone has any more questions and you want to put them in the chat for Brad or Naz, please do that now. So going into the last point of today. So this is interesting. So we wanted to finish here. We asked, what is the top challenges you have as a salesperson? So there was 3. The one that was most interesting is the top one was staying motivated in a post-COVID world. Getting responses from prospects was second, and being generally happy in my job. So if we just focus on the first one, kind of staying motivated, what do you think about this, Naz, and what do you do to keep your team motivated?
So I was shocked to see this stat, but then I reflected I'm not that shocked to see this stat because you can have such a
Which one is it?
Yeah, you can have such a great day in sales or a great week in sales, and then your next 3 weeks can be utter rubbish, right? And that can really impact your morale and the way you're feeling. And I reflected back on this and thought about what would I say here. I think if you aren't being consistent in your role, you can't expect to have motivation in your role, because being consistent will let you test and see if results come. If results come, that drives that motivation, because if you're winning and you're getting paid, you're motivated. So if you aren't staying motivated or struggling to stay motivated, I'd ask and question, well, how consistent are you being in your process? Are you consistently trying the same thing over and over again and tweaking? Or are you trying scattergun approach across different verticals, different kind of customers saying different things? Because without the consistency, you can't get results, which then ultimately won't lead to motivation. But in terms of the team and keeping myself and my team motivated, what I look at is actually trying to understand the individuals that I'm managing and working with. Why are they here? What are they trying to do? And it's really setting those short-term goals or vision kind of achievements for them, not necessarily professional, but actually personal. So I can get to understand why this person comes to work every day. So across my team, I've got those that are kind of getting married, right? Getting their first houses. But I've got those that are sending their kids off to university, right? It's quite a diverse range of people and circumstances. And they're all motivated by different things. So if I can understand that with my team and on an individual level, we can cross-check and sense-check each time we meet to see how we're working towards achieving those short-term goals and those long-term goals for them as a team. And the last thing I do, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go. Sorry, I've already finished.
The last thing I do is during kind of our weekly stand-ups where we meet kind of three times a week in the morning, we do a sense check in terms of scoring. So, 1 to 5, 5 being absolutely amazing, you're on top of the world, 1 being I've just handed my notice in, and recording those scores over that week so I can see the consistency. So if I have an individual that always scores 3.5, 3.5, 3.5, and then one day they come in and say, I'm a 2 today, I can pick up that something's wrong with that individual and then kind of support them throughout that day or week.
That's really interesting. There's so many interesting points there. So like, as we've gone through and you're understanding like the different data points here from some of these key bits in the report, like everyone's working in this hybrid world where sometimes they're around people, sometimes they're not. We all know humans, we're social animals, right? So generally as a rule of thumb. So it's interesting, talking about, are people internally motivated? Do they motivate themselves? Do they need to be externally motivated? And you wonder in this hybrid world, are you going to be a great salesperson if you have to always be externally motivated? So when you talked about discipline, that was really resonating with me, because I was like, well, a lot of the time in sales, you got to do the things you don't want to do. It's like with any job. So it's being like, right, I could spend 70% of my time building the next great thing that people might use at Jiminny, or I can talk to customers and find out what they want. I know, so there's different things. You have to balance your time and spend it where it's going to move the needle and really understand stuff. But they're 2 great tips there. So you talked about external goal settings to keep your team motivated, so they're not just looking at internal things. And I think especially with the way things are, that's great. And this 1 to 5 daily score on your huddles, people actually talking about how they're feeling, again, very much with a modern approach there. I love that. Cool. What about you, Brad? What do you think around motivating, staying motivated and the point, and then how do you do that with your team?
Yeah, I like Naz's scale. Just don't ask me on a Monday after like the Badgers and the Lions lost. Like then you're just going to get low numbers. It's very relative. But
yeah, you see it in the week. You always see
it'll go up. Yeah, you got another game next weekend. It's fine. So it depends when you ask me. But I think what's interesting about this, in I guess if you were to look at the middle one, it's like, yeah, it's always an issue getting a response from prospects. I don't care, pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, like, you're 3,000, like whatever, you're always going to have that issue. Now, maybe you could argue it's a little more noisy because everyone's sending emails and there's less of the in-person and whatnot. And there's more, LinkedIn messages and just like there's a lot going on and you're constantly in front of your computer. So you see a lot more of it and it feels very inundating. But I that's always an issue with sales. And I think we continue to say staying motivated. It is hard. You mentioned this, but I think you both alluded to it, but like this roller coaster in sales is tough. It's hard to get no's. It's hard to not set up meetings, and to be around others and have them kind of provide some of that motivation is very important, and provide some of that guidance, I think, is really great. And so when you do take away some of that social, environment, that's tough to be by yourself in your own place. Maybe you're, in New York in like a a closet basically, or London, or one of these cities that costs a lot of money, and you're early on in your career and you're just getting no, like that's a tough place to be when you're alone. And so having a team that can support you, that can help motivate you, I think is super important. One thing I think the pandemic did do is have a lot of people reevaluate like what is important to them and what does motivate them, and making sure that you're open about that and having open discussions, managers and individual contributors, and everybody should be having open discussions about what drives you and like what gets you excited. So if things I mentioned, the Badgers, like that gets me excited, then maybe my manager should think about like getting me tickets if I'm doing a really good job to a Badger game, or something along those lines. But making sure that you're aligning on that and don't keep that in. I think that's the most important thing. Everybody should be themselves and be excited about fostering an environment where people can share what they like, what they don't like. And as Naz said, like if you can share when you're not feeling great, could be about business. I just lost the deal, but it could also be like, hey, my kid's sick. They've been home. They've been up all night. Like I'm tired, right? That's okay. Like that's great to share, because at least then others can support you. And so I think that motivation piece is obviously very much challenging, because it's not always about the work that you're doing. Now, being happy in my job is, and so like that's something that we should hopefully be able to control and be able to have more say over as leadership, and be able to help coach our team around, is this the right role for you? How do we make sure you're succeeding? How do we make sure you're happy in the role that you're in?
Yeah, and I think you're talking about that time and communication and motivating people, whether it's a spiff or something like that. But I think we're really good at it, and it sounds like you guys are as well. Like you get in a huddle and you spend 10 minutes actually talking about stuff that's happened the day before or the weekend before, understanding people's lives. But as good as we are at it, I have to check myself sometimes, because you're really busy. People just jump onto a Zoom and Teams and just go into work mode, like you said about Brad, it being coin operated. I think it's making sure that you give people that time to share and talk and understand. Otherwise, they're not going to feel engaged, and they're not going to feel motivated, right?
Yeah.
Cool. I think we had one question, which was from Mazin, which was basically been in sales for about 5 years, and I feel that not too much has changed in COVID, except that working remotely is well accepted. Cost of work has reduced. Any thoughts on this? What did you had some thoughts on it, Naz?
Yeah, I came back to think if Mazin was referring more to kind of that, the cost of work in terms of the company's overheads, the real estate, the office space, etc., then yeah, you theoretically think, oh, it's reduced. They don't need the office space. But my argument would be, or I question, how many companies have actually realized those savings? So I know for even the startups I've been, we've kept the office space that was designed for 100 people, and that never went away. If you look at the Googles, the Apples, the Metas that have built these massive campuses for their employees, there's no way they're going to leave them empty. And that's
why they're asking everybody to come back, because they don't want this empty building.
Yeah, that's costing them a bomb. So I don't think they've realized the saving. I think you're coming to freelancing.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's mentioning offshore, like, yes, there are ways to supplement some work. So I would agree with that, in the sense of you can find variable costs as opposed to fixed costs a lot of times now. And because everybody's interconnected through that, you could probably find ways to accomplish some tasks in that way. Though I would also argue that like the cost of folks, we talk about staying motivated, like the big term, like quiet quitting. There's like a lot of stuff going on. Like there's a massive cost there as well. Much easier to pinpoint and to be able to handle when you're in person. It's very hard to understand when somebody is unmotivated when you can't see them and they're at home. So under productivity, I would say, is like a massive cost that is very hard to measure and very hard to realize, which from a company's perspective is really challenging. And then you add on top of that somebody, the current market where, well, I guess the market maybe even 3 months ago, where a lot of people were leaving, taking new jobs, and there was just a massive shift in the industry. That costs a lot of money too, to then go find, hire, train, and retain new talent and current talent. That also has a big cost to it as well. So from like a per employee perspective, it may actually be lower, and you may be able to get around the fact that you could hire folks in lower cost areas, and so maybe they demand less salaries or different things. But at the same time, making sure that the company is still running efficiently and that we're getting the most productivity out of all of our team, I think is more challenging than it was previously.
Yeah, there's always a positive and negative to everything. So yeah, there might be some smaller things you could offshore, but I think generally people used to call it like a London wage, like you'd be paid different if you're in London or like almost if you're in New York. But I think, you know, people can be in remote places now and everyone just demands the same salary no matter where they are, even though there's different models. So if anything, it's just brought everything up. So I actually think when you look at it as an employer, and sometimes in tech companies, payrolls, sometimes your biggest cost is actually, you know, probably gone up in ways, you know, from that perspective, if you're looking at talent. So, you know, there's definitely two sides to it. Cool. Awesome. I think that's pretty much a wrap, guys. Thank you so much, Brad, Naz, for all your insights. It was awesome. I'll hand back to Savannah.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody, for joining in. Thank you, Tom, Nasri, and Brad, for bringing these findings and insight to the community. Thanks to everybody that's joined us. Before we hop, I have one more thing. Sales Hacker team is running a confidential survey on the state of sales tech. So I'll drop a link to that in the chat, but it takes 15 minutes or less to fill out. And then you can leave your email there to enter into a $500 giveaway. We'll announce the winner for that in October sometime. So be sure to participate in that if you'd like. But other than that, we will see y'all later. Thank you, everybody.